What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics. And today we got a reaction. It's been way too long. It's been 6 years and 3,000 videos. And finally, we get around to The Clash and London Calling. This is for a while going to be a Patreon exclusive reaction for our Patreon members. They're the only ones that get to see it. Eventually, it's going to make it to YouTube, so you may be watching it over there. But thank you so much to the Patreon members. They voted for this album. They vote every month for an exclusive reaction. If you'd like to support us in any way, check out that Patreon link below or the Patreon link on the end screen. This channel does not happen without our patrons. We're running a free trial. Come check it out. All right, well, I've done several albums for Patreon. I'm doing them every month now. I mean, we've got David Bowie, we got Kate Bush, we got Elvis Costello. We have a lot of stuff up. We have the Sex Pistols. So I go all in on these because these are classic albums. I mean, this is a stone cold classic. A lot of people consider it one of the 20 best albums of all time. So there's going to be a lot of info here, so buckle up, boys and girls. Third studio album was originally released as a double album in the UK on December 14th, 1979 by CBS Records, and in the US the next month, but January 1980 by Epic Records. It becomes a little bit important, right? Because it was released in the 70s in the UK and the 80s in the US. So when you get to decade-ending publication top albums, they fall in the 70s in the UK and the 80s in the US. That's the only reason why I point that out. They recorded the album with producer Guy Stevens at Wessex Sound Studios in London over a 5 to 6 week period starting in August of 79, which, man, they got albums out quick. Like now they don't get out that quick. Following a change in management and a period of writer's block for songwriters Joe Strummer and, of course, Mick Jones. Bridging a traditional punk rock sound and a new wave aesthetic, London Calling reflects the band's growing interest in styles beyond their punk roots, including reggae, rockabilly, ska, New Orleans R&B, pop, lounge jazz, and hard rock. Lyrical themes include social displacement, unemployment, racial conflict, drug use, and the responsibilities of adulthood, which are just not that much fun sometimes. The album was a top 10 chart success in the UK at number 9, 27 in the US, 16 in Australia, 12 in Canada and New Zealand, 4 in Norway, 2 in Sweden. I just tell you that because it hit all over the world, right? And has sold over 5 million copies worldwide and was certified platinum in the US. Of course, that's sales of 1 million. It's also met with widespread critical acclaim and retrospectively been named one of the greatest albums of all time. On Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time, it comes in at number 16. On their second album, Give 'Em Enough Rope, right before this in 1978, they had started to depart from the punk rock sound. While touring the US in 1979, they chose supporting acts such as rhythm and blues artists Bo Diddley, Sam and Dave, Lee Dorsey, Screamin' Jay Hawkins, as well as neo-traditional country artist Joe Eli, and punk rockabilly band The Cramps. The Clash's growing fascination with rock and roll inspired their direction for London Calling, which is very important for the band's longevity, which I'll get into. After recording Give 'Em Enough Rope, they separated from their manager Bernard Rhodes. This meant they had to leave their rehearsal studio in Camden Town. Tour manager Johnny Green and drum roadie Baker found a new place to rehearse, Vanilla Studios, in the back of a garage in Pimlico. They arrived at Vanilla in May of 79 with no new songs prepared for their third album. Mick and Joe had experienced a period of writer's block and had not written a new song in over a year. Rehearsals were held in Vanilla Studios over mid-1979. They began playing covers from genres including, that's how they got inspired, right? Rockabilly, rock and roll, rhythm and blues, and reggae. In contrast to previous rehearsal sessions, the band kept these rehearsals private and did not allow hangers-on to attend. This seclusion allowed them to rebuild their confidence without worrying about the reaction from outsiders who were familiar with the band's punk rock style. Yeah, they might have started freaking out, right? The band gradually rebuilt their confidence with the styles of the session's early cover songs, setting the template for the diverse material that would be written for London Calling. The band were also encouraged by growing recognition of drummer Topper Headon's skills, which they realized could be used to perform music in a wide array of genres and styles beyond punk rock. I'm not saying you're going to have a good drummer to be able to do punk rock, but in punk rock, don't get mad, punk rockers. In punk rock, your musicianship skills don't always have to be at the same level they are in other genres. So in other words, they realized this guy Topper is like the man and he can do whatever. And that allowed them to be able to explore other options. The Clash wrote and recorded demos at Vanilla, with Mick Jones composing and arranging much of the music, and Joe wrote most of the lyrics. Now, in August 1979, the band entered Wessex Studios to begin recording London Calling. They asked Guy Stevens to produce the album, much to the dismay of CBS Records. Stevens had alcohol and drug problems, and his production methods were unconventional. During a recording session, he swung a ladder and upturned chairs, apparently to create a rock and roll atmosphere. The Clash, especially Paul Simonon, who eventually was in Gorillaz for a little bit in 2010, got along well with Stevens and found Stevens' work to be very helpful and productive to both his playing and the recording as a band. The album, as I told you, was recorded in a 5 to 6 week period, but that was 18-hour days, and a lot of the songs were recorded in 1 or 2 takes. The artwork, of course, features Paul smashing his Fender Precision bass against a stage at the Palladium in New York City on September 20th, 1979. He explained in a 2011 interview with Fender that he smashed the bass out of frustration when he learned that the bouncers at the concert would not allow the audience members to stand up out of their seats. I wasn't taking it out on the bass guitar because there ain't anything wrong with it. Penny Smith, who photographed the band for the album, originally did not want the photograph to be used. She thought it was too out of focus, but strummer and graphic designer Ray Lowry thought it would make a good album cover. In 2002, Smith's photograph was named the best rock and roll photograph of all time by Q Magazine, commenting that, quote, "It captures the ultimate rock and roll moment, total loss of control." The cover artwork was designed by Lowry and was an homage, of course, to the design of Elvis Presley's self-titled debut album, with pink letters down the left side and green text across the bottom. I actually have an album reaction to that first Elvis album up. The London Calling was released as a double album, and that was only sold for about the price of a single album. This is incredibly important, right? Their record label, CBS Records, at first denied the band's request for the album to be released as a double. In return, though, I mean, this is just a way around it. It's a double, right? CBS gave permission for the band to include a free 12-inch single that played at 33 1/3 RPM, which is what a vinyl record plays at, boys and girls. Ultimately, the planned 12-inch record became a second 9-track LP. It's just weird, right? Record companies are weird. No, you can't have a double album, but we'll let you release a free album with it. Not the same thing? Okay. All lead vocals by Joe Strummer, except where I note. All tracks written by Strummer and Mick Jones, except where I note. If you're on Patreon, you already know this, but if you're watching on YouTube, it's your first time watching, the music will not be in the video, but it will be at a Vimeo link below. Click on that and follow along. We're going to start this bad boy off, of course, with the title track. First track on the album, London Calling. The title alludes to the BBC World Service's station identification. This is London Calling, which was used during World War II, often in broadcasts to occupied countries. The lyrics reflect the concern felt by Strummer about world events with a reference to a nuclear error. That was the incident at 3 Mile Island, which occurred earlier in 1979. Boys and girls, I'm old. You might not be this old. I remember that. I was 8 years old, and it was a scary moment. A nuclear reactor had an accident, and that's not a good thing. And we were in the throes of the Cold War and still believed nuclear war could happen at any moment. And it still could, obviously, now in 2024 with a lot of stuff going on. But we really thought it could happen at any moment, so it was scary. Joe has said, "We felt that we were struggling about to slip down a slope or something, grasping with our fingernails, and there was no one there to help us." The line, "London is drowning and I live by the river," comes from concerns that if the River Thames flooded, most of central London would drown, something that led to the construction of the Thames Barrier. I never know if I'm saying that word right, but if you're in London and I'm not, you want to reach through that screen and strangle this American right now. The lyrics also reflect desperation of the band's situation in 1979, struggling with high debt, without management, and arguing with their record label over whether it could be called a single or a double album. The lines referring to "Now Don't Look to Us, phony Beatlemania has bitten the dust" reflects the concerns of the bands over its situation after the punk rock boom in England had ended in 1977. It fades out with a Morse code signal spelling SOS, reiterating the earlier urgent sense of emergency and further alluding to drowning in the river. It was released as the only single from the album in the UK and reached number 11, becoming at once the band's highest charting single until "Should I Stay or Should I Go" hit number 1 10 years later. The song did not make the US charts as "Train in Vain" was released as a single and broke the band in the US, reaching 23 in the pop charts, which we'll get to way later on. London Calling was the first Clash song to chart elsewhere in the world, reaching the top 40 in Australia. Because remember, this is their third studio album. Now, I was surprised I mentioned at the start that their first album, which I've never heard, is, highly, highly acclaimed. Over the years, this has become regarded by various critics as the band's finest song. It is one of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's 500 songs that shaped rock and roll, and it's inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. Joe Strummer explained in 1988 to Melody Maker, "I read about 10 news reports in one day, calling down all variety of plagues on us. The initial inspiration came in a conversation Strummer had with then-fiancée Gabby Salter in a taxi ride home to their flat in World's End. Quote, there was a lot of Cold War nonsense going on, and we knew that London was susceptible to flooding. She told me to write something about that noted drummer in an interview with Uncut magazine. Now, guys, most of the other songs and stuff I have very little info, so don't think I'm going to kill you with all this, but it's an important album. It's a very important album. So we're going to jump into the music now. I'm going to have the lyrics up as always. Important in these things. Thanks again, patrons. All right, I don't need to break down the song because I did it beforehand. I usually do it afterhand. Just a fantastic song, right? Just an unbelievable song, the SOS. Like, it's just great. It's just great. Joe's vocals, all of it. It's an iconic song for a reason. Love it. Now, next up, we have Brand New Cadillac. Originally written by Vince Taylor, originally performed by Vince Taylor and his Playboys in 1959. This was the first song recorded from the album. They cite the song as, quote, one of the first British rock and roll records, and initially had used it as a warm-up song before recording, and I would imagine this was one of the songs they were playing when they had writer's block, just trying to get inspiration, and here it is on the album. Look, just a fun song they could have recorded in 1959. I would imagine they stayed pretty loyal to the original. I don't know the original, and I don't know anything about Vince Taylor, but here's what they said. Topper Heaton, the drummer, called this song the first British rock and roll song. Joe Strummer called Vince Taylor, who presented a leather-clad wild man image, the beginning of rock and roll in England. So very, very important. So this American needed that kind of insight in there to kind of understand why they went there with this one. Really good. Tough to follow up London Calling with whatever you do it with. A good choice to follow up with something probably that's not your song. Next up, we have Jimmy Jazz. The song said to be derived from jam sessions during the band's workup for this album, so kind of same thing. Strummer's semi-improvised lyrics place a listener in the middle of a film noir-like world, obliquely telling the story of Jimmy Jazz, an outlaw on the run from the police, and Jimmy Dread. All right, Jimmy Jazz. So if you were listening to this song in 1979, you were a hardcore Clash person, you were a punker. Talking to you, Heath Palace. And this song came on. You were probably like, WTH. What is going on here? Because this is definitely not punk rock. I like it. I saw that in its first live performance prior to the album, it caused bewilderment among music writers. Mick Jones even introduced the song in Chicago with a mocking. This is the home of blues, right? So, yeah, I think it's cool, man. I like it. Next up, we have Hateful. Another great song musically. Catchy, hateful. It's about the love-hate relationship with drugs. That's just what it is, right? But anything I want, he gives it to me. So the drugs could also be the drug dealer, but they also cost money, so that's a hateful part of it. Yeah, man, it's good. We got one more song left for side one. Remember, there's 4 sides, so side one about to be done. We got Rudy Can't Fail, where Strummer and Jones are both on lead vocals on this one. It praises the rude boys of Jamaica in the 1960s who challenged their elders' status quo. That's what a punk band should write about, right? The song is about a fun-loving young man who's criticized by his elders for not acting as a responsible adult, drinking beer at breakfast, and describe him as being so crude and feckless, to which he responds, I know that my life makes you nervous, but I tell you, I can't live in service. The song's title derives from Desmond Decker's 1967 song 007, Shantytown. Joe said, I wrote Rudy Can't Fail about some mates who were drinking brew for breakfast. They think nothing of it. Me, I'm past the stage where I can't. I can drink brew for breakfast, but not every day. And that's what made me notice them. I thought it was a hell of a way to start a day. You know, Joe, it is a hell of a way to start a day. I've never done it, and I don't see at this advanced age that I ever will. Plus, I don't drink. All right, definitely going the reggae route here. So this first side has all kinds of things on it, right? Very fun song. You know, Mick's basically singing all the verses. Joe's coming in on the bridge, the intro, and he comes in with him some on the chorus and some other things too. But has some pop and soul elements. This has everything, showing you what these guys can do. And, you know, I didn't get into it totally. I mean, I've read so much about this album since I spent probably 5 hours researching this album. You probably I could tell from the intro, but I try to pare it down for you. But, you know, they had to change. Punk was dying. So they had to evolve, and they were so talented they could do it. And it just shows you in these first 5 songs, they're all over the place. They can still do punk, great, but they were all over the place in a fantastic way. Let's go to side 2 with Spanish Bombs. Lead vocals by Joe and Mick on this one. Strummer wrote the song during the recording sessions for London Calling. He developed the idea for the song while traveling home from Wessex Studios in London, listening to a radio news report of ETA terror bombings of tourist hotels on the Costa Brava. It reminded him of the ongoing Provisional Irish Republican Army campaign in the United Kingdom. It compares the modern-day tourist experience of Spain with the circumstances of the Spanish Civil War and contrasts the trenches full of poets to the planeloads of British tourists visiting the country's beaches in the post-Franco era. Praising the heroism of the Civil War Republicans, the song alludes to the death of anti-fascist poet Federico Garcia Lorca with the line, "Oh, please leave the ventana open." Federico Lorca is dead and gone, echoing Garcia Lorca's similar line in his poem Farewell, "If I die, leave the balcony open." Ventana is Spanish for window. I mean, you probably knew that. I did not. Lead vocals on the song are shared. Like I said, Strummer mainly sings the verses while Jones sings the chorus. They kind of flip of where they were on Rudy Can't Fail. Mickey Gallagher is also on this as a guest musician on the organ. All right, let's get it. All right, Spanish Bombs. Love the vocals from Strummer and Jones. They work perfect on here. Really good vocals. Very strong subject matter, obviously, but the song itself is extremely pleasant. It's not too hard rocky, even though it could be for this, but I see why people really like this song. Next up, we have an interesting subject matter. We got The Right Profile. It's about American actor Montgomery Clift, with lyrics alluding to his car crash, subsequent alcohol and drug abuse. The time from his crash in 1956 to his death in 1966 was famously called the longest suicide in Hollywood history. The first several verses are written from the point of view of a group of passerby who see Clift in his wrecked car and try to figure out whether they recognize the victim. The song then makes reference to Clift's spiraling use of alcohol and depressants after the crash, and even his propensity in his final years of calling out orders to those around him. All right, The Right Profile. Great horns on this one. Another song that is very diverse from the songs on here. There's a lot of separation. A really good song. I'd love to know why Joe wrote this. Like, what inspired him to write about Montgomery Clift? He's not really that well known nowadays, but he was a huge star, right? But just as some of these other things, interesting subject matter. Next up, we got Lost in the Supermarket. Lead vocals by Mick. Strummer first wrote the lyrics of the chorus on the reverse of an Ernie Ball custom gauge strings paper envelope. We know a lot about this album. The song's lyrics describe someone struggling to deal with an increasingly commercialized world and rampant consumerism. Joe would be shocked right now. The song opens with Strummer's autobiographical memories of his parents' home in suburban Warlingham with a hedge over which I could never see, the line says, with lines as, "I came in here for that special offer, guaranteed personality." The protagonist bemoans the depersonalization of the world around him. This is before cell phones, boys and girls. The song speaks of numbness from suburban alienation and the feelings of disillusionment that come through youth in modern society. In the making of London Calling, the Last Testament DVD released with its 25th anniversary edition of London Calling in 2004, Strummer said he wrote the lyrics imagining Jones's life growing up in a basement with his mother and grandmother. Topper Heaton used a tom-tom drum on the song instead of a snare after seeing Taj Mahal's drummer doing the same thing in a concert the night before the recording. That's what you love, right? They're so prolific and so creative during this time. They're like, I saw this dude do this. I'm just going to play this on this song right now that we are going to lay down. All right, let's check it out. All right, Lost in the Supermarket. This song is fantastic. I mean, it's a standout. It's up there with London Calling right now, the title track for me. It's just great. I mean, Mick sounds fantastic. I like Mick's vocals as well as Joe's, maybe better somewhat, which kind of surprises me, but I don't know. But a really, really well done song that instrumentally is built out so pleasantly. I mean, these guys are firing on all cylinders. You know, you get something like, I did the Sex Pistols months ago, the comparison of that, and it's not the same kind of music because this is not punk so far as I've mentioned. Like, there's some punk on here, there's punk subject matter, but the difference of mastery of the instrument and musicianship is night and day. It's polar opposite. All right, next up we have Clamp Down. Lead vocals by Mick and Joe on this one. It began as an instrumental track called Working and Waiting. It is sometimes called Working for the Clamp Down, which is the main lyric of the song. Its lyrics concern those who have forsaken the idealism of youth and urges young people to fight the status quo. The word clamp down is a coverall term the writers adopted to define the oppressive establishment. Notably, its more reactionary voices who were to be heard throughout the 1970s, calling alarmingly for clampdowns by government and law enforcement on strikers, agitators, benefit claimants, football hooligans, punks, and other perceived threats to the social, economic, and moral well-being of the UK. So yeah, this does sound like a punk song. In 1980, it was released as a single backed with the Guns of Brixton in Australia. We'll get to that song in just a minute. The single was not released in any other territories with the exception of US promos, and that's really not a single, a promo. Not really. These lyrics are seen to refer to how one gets caught by the capital economic system and its ethos of work, debt, power, position, and conformist lifestyle. Pretty much the great American dream. Strummer, who proclaimed himself a socialist, also uses the song's closing refrain to highlight this mindset as a potential trap and offers a warning not to give oneself over to the clamp down. This is emphasized in the coda by Jones's repetition of the words work and more work on the beat over Strummer's breathy repetition of the phrase working for the clamp down. This reaffirms the idea that Strummer saw the clamp down as a threat to all who get caught up in the modern economic wage hour system. Joe's father was a British diplomat, and Joe was sent away to boarding school where he detested, quote, the thick rich people's thick rich kids. Joe said, I only saw my father once a year after being sent to boarding school. He was a real disciplinarian who was always giving me speeches about how he had pulled himself up by the sweat of his brow. A real guts and determination man. What he was really saying to me was, if you play by the rules, you can end up like me. And I saw right away I didn't want to end up like him. Once I got out of town, or once I got out of my own, I realized I was right. I saw how the rules worked, and I didn't like them. Preach it, Joe. All right, the clamp down. Obviously, from everything I read at the start, very serious subject matter, very good subject matter, but incredibly catchy. Working for the clamp down. You know, like it just, man, it's so well done. The instrumentation, again, is just on point. I like the dual sharing of the vocals between Joe and Mick. I think it works best when they do that. Their voices really complement each other well. Yeah, I mean, nice song. And now we're about to end out side 2 with Paul's song, The Guns of Brixton. So I would imagine that the bass is going to be on point in this. He grew up in Brixton, South London. The song has a strong reggae influence, reflecting the culture of the area and the reggae gangster film, The Harder They Come. While recording the lead vocals for the song, Paul sang while staring directly at a CBS executive who had visited the studio during the sessions, giving him the desired amount of emotion in his voice. Now, this predates the riots that happened in this area in the 80s, but the lyrics depict the feelings of discontent in the area because of the heavy-handedness of the police, the recession, and other problems at the time. The lyrics refer to a Brixton-born son of Jamaican immigrants who, quote, feels like Ivan at the end of Harder They Come, referring to Ivanhoe Martin's death in the 1972 film The Harder They Come. Paul was originally doubtful about the song's lyrics, which discuss an individual's paranoid outlook on life, but was encouraged to continue working on it by Joe. Although they had written and performed previous songs that combined reggae with punk rock, this was the first Clash song that was created purely as a reggae song. The rhythm guitar line has a Jamaican rocksteady sound. Now, it was not initially released as a single, but a version of the song, taken from the remastered version of this album, was released entitled Return to Brixton in July of 1990. I mean, it wasn't a big hit, but it hit 57 in the UK. So if you're thinking, Sean, this was a single, it was. It was over 10 years later. All right, I was right on with the bass on that one, right? I started off with fire bass right away. I think Paul's voice fit this well because of the subject matter of it, the arrangement of it. It was reggae, but we had those kind of sound effects in there and stuff. It was a good song. It was a song that kind of drew me along through the story of it. Remember, this finished out side 2. So it's important. It's the vinyl age. So what's the first and last song on the vinyl? That was always so important in the vinyl age. Now we're going to go, I would say, to the second LP, to side 3. But, there wasn't a second LP. It's just the bonus 33 and a third that was included. We got Rongum Boyo, written by Clive Alfonso, originally performed by the Rulers. And we're going to get a little bit on this song at the start of it, I read, of Stagger Lee. Yes, we had the start of Stagger Lee on there. The organ's on point. Mickey Gallagher was in the Guns of Brixton, but he's really in this one. The brass on here is fantastic. I don't know the original, but this is really well done. Except we have what sounds like a punk song, Death or Glory. Features Strummer on lead vocals. It was written about the previous generation of rock stars who swore they would die before growing old. He originally worked it out on the piano. We took inspiration from As Time Goes By, a song featured in the film Casablanca, which I do believe was 1939, 1941, one of those two. While the band was recording Death or Glory, their producer Guy Stevens came into the studio and started throwing chairs around at the back wall in front of CBS record executives. I didn't go into all of Guy's story. I told you at the beginning that CBS was like, why do you want this guy? He was responsible really with finding Mott the Hoople, who was Mick's favorite group. So that's why he wanted Guy. Guy was crazy through this whole thing. The stories on here are unbelievable. So the guy that really kept this together was the engineer, Bill Price, because there's stories, right? There's stories of Guy coming in and pouring wine over Joe's fingers while he's playing a piano because he didn't like the way he was playing it to try to get him fired up. And he would just go scream in their faces in the middle of recording a song. He was off the chain. So I don't know if this album was inspired because of him or succeeded despite him. But that story just reminded me of that. So yeah, I went into it a little bit for you. Let's go Death or Glory. Death or Glory. What a fantastic song. Joe sounds great on here. Just the melody and it's just so good. It's one of the best songs on this album. And kind of Joe is looking back on his life, right? And kind of saying, look, when we're young, we idealize things. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't know. We don't have life's experience. Like, we're never going to be a sellout. We're going to stand on this because everything's black and white when you're young for a lot of us. And you realize those gray areas are not compromised. They are, but they're not selling yourself out. Now, you can go too far and sell yourself out, but you've got to come off of that black and white a little bit because life is just not that way. And so he's kind of trying to wax philosophical, being a little older here than a lot of the punk rockers were, and saying, look, yeah, it's not death or glory. I'm either going to do this or die young. It's not really that. You're going to, if you live long enough, you're going to kind of go to the middle a little bit. But I thought the song sounded great, and that is a fantastic subject matter. And next up, we got Coca-Cola. All right, Coca-Cola, just a fun little under 2-minute song. I mean, I don't have a lot to say about it. A lot of the lines in the song were taglines for Coca-Cola, advertising lines. I don't remember all of them. Some of them were back in the 1920s. But once again, it's the third time I said it, where Joe gets his inspiration from, it's everywhere to write these songs. Pretty cool. Now to finish off side 3, we got The Card Sheet, lead vocals by Mick. While working on the song, the band recorded each part twice to create a sound as big as possible. A little Phil Spector wall of sound, I guess, but only times 2. Yeah, let's go. All right, The Card Sheet. Had a little bit of Springsteen in there, right? All the piano, all this other stuff, the brass in there, obviously, but a great story. And Springsteen's my all-time favorite, so maybe why this song hit with me. But yeah, they're telling a great story. It's got a little different feel to the song, as so many of these songs have. All right, we're going to start off the 4th and final side. We got Lovers Rock. All right, Lovers Rock. A little different subject matter on here than, the rest of the songs don't have a common subject matter, but this is about love, or sort of how to take care of those that you love. We'll leave it at that, but just kind of how to be there for that person that you love. And it was well done, man. It's not a standout for me, but there's 19 songs. There can't all be standouts. And next up, we got Four Horsemen. Is it the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse? I have no idea. Four Horsemen. Well done. Once again, a little bit like Lovers Rock, the first 2 songs on this last side. They're okay for me. They're not horrible by any means, right? It's just the rest of this album is so good, but finally done. Next up, we have I'm Not Down, lead vocals by Mick. He wrote the song as a response in defiance to difficulties that he had faced, like the assault described in verse 2. First time it was played live at Notre Dame Hall in July of 1979. Strummer introduced it by saying, I hope no one is contemplating suicide. All right, I'm Not Down. A little bit of a rebound for me. I like this better than the first 2 songs on this side. And the way Mick's holding out those vocals, I'm not down. Like, it was well done, man. It's right back on vibe with the first 3 sides for me. Now we got Revolution Rock, written by Jackie Edwards, Danny Ray, originally performed by Danny Ray and the Revolutionaries. According to class bassist Paul, Danny Ray put out his version of Revolution Rock just before recording London Calling. Ray incorporates aspects of the rock-steady R&B singer Jackie Edwards' song Get Up on the track, so Edwards is listed as the co-writer. In the Clash's version, Joe changed several of the lyrics, including a reference to Mac the Knife and the trend of smashing up seats at punk shows. The song is an ode to self-motivation. It was originally going to close London Calling, but Train in Vain was landed at the last minute, which we'll get to in a minute. All right, Revolution Rock. As with our other cover on here, I don't know the originalist. This one seems like a right down the middle, straight up reggae song to me, right? This one's the most reggae on this album to me. It was well done. Like I said, I don't know the original. It doesn't matter whether, sometimes I don't think you should stay true to originals because why do you want a carbon copy? Other times, depending on the style of the song, it works. But yeah, like I said, like on this whole album, the musicianship is on point. Well, we've done it. We're here. The final song, Train in Vain, lead vocals by Mick. On the original version of the album, it was not listed on the sleeve, nor the label on the record itself, but a sticker indicating the track was affixed to the outer cellophane wrapper. It's also scratched into the vinyl in the runoff area on the 4th side of the album. Later editions included it in the track listing. Third and final single was the first Clash song to reach the top 30 in the US, went to 23, 26 in New Zealand, 62 in Canada, and in 2010, Rolling Stone named this the 298th greatest song of all time. It was added after the deal for the band to write a song for an NME flexi disc fell through. And as Mick later said, the real story on it is that we originally needed a song to give to the NME for a flexi disc. And then it was decided it wasn't going to work out, or decided the flexi disc didn't work out. So we had this spare track we had done as a giveaway. So we put it on London Calling, but there wasn't time. The sleeves were already done, thus the sticker. When the album was released, many fans assumed it was called Stand By Me, and you even see that down below on Spotify. They have that in parentheses. It wasn't on the original album that way. But the meaning of the song's title was obscure, as the title phrase cannot be found in the lyrics. Mick Jones, who wrote most of the song, offered this explanation. The track was like a train rhythm, and there was once again that feeling of being lost. Now, it has been interpreted by some as a response to Typical Girls by the Slits, which mentions girls standing by their men. Mick Jones had split up with Slits guitarist Viv Albertine shortly before he wrote the song. She actually commented, "I'm really proud to have inspired that, but often he won't admit to it. He used to get the train in my place in Shepherd's Bush, and I would not let him in. He was bleeding on the doorstep. That was cruel." They separated right at the time of recording this. All right, let's go. All right, Train in Vain. I see why they thought it was called Stand By Me if you didn't know the name of this song. That's 100% what you would guess. That song was flipping fantastic. I was wondering if I'd know it. I would have only been 8 years old, maybe 7, depending on what time of the year it was released. But yeah, this song is unbelievable. So good. To book in this album with the title track and this song is just absolutely perfect. So I'm glad that this finished the album off. There was nothing wrong with Revolution Rock, but this is what needed to finish the album off. A true standout. And now we'll get to my favorite tracks. Honorable mentions: Rudy Can't Fail, Spanish Bombs, and The Card Cheat. Faves, I kind of gave them away. You got to know what they are. Death or Glory, Lost in the Supermarket, London Calling, and Train in Vain. That's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 7. 7 to the 19. Now we're going to get to my overall score. This channel's been around for a little over 6 years, real recently. We have 3,000 albums up. I thought I was about to do something until we got to the fourth side that I've only done a handful of times. I'm a notoriously tough grader. Trey is too, but I'm way tougher than Trey is. A lot of you out there who watch this a lot know this. I've probably given 5 perfect 10s ever in the history of this channel. I thought I was going to get there here on an album that's 19 tracks, which seems unfathomable, but it was almost there. The fourth side was still really good. So even though it's like picking at perfection almost, right? It's not like the songs are bad, and 2 of the songs were fantastic, but it knocks it down just like that much for me. So I'm going to be at a 9.75, one of the highest grades I've ever given. This album is legendary. It is highly rated for a reason. It has been fantastic to enjoy it this way. I'd listened to it one time, but that was when we were doing album drafts, and I was listening to the 30 albums a week. And so it's not listened to like this is totally different where you can sit here and focus on it. This album is a masterpiece, just an absolute masterpiece. Yeah, it's going to show up high in our newly revised top 100 albums of all time for me, which that review will be up soon. Depending on when you're watching this, those videos might be up already, but fantastic. Thank you to the patrons for bringing this. I need to know what you guys think. Where does this rank in the catalog? You know, people have different things. A lot of people think their debut album is the greatest punk album of all time. I don't think this is punk. I think this is post-punk going into all kinds of things. It's not even just post-punk. It shows you how talented these guys are. And, you know, when you're comparing The Clash to like Sex Pistols, you can probably do it with the first albums because that's kind of what I've heard that Clash album is. But this is a whole different level of musicianship. This is doctorate level. And the Sex Pistols, if you love them, nothing against them, but they're down here at, you know, junior high level. Nothing but the musicianship, the songwriting. It's another level, man. These guys are firing all cylinders. So let me know what you think down below. If you haven't already, hit that thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. And thanks to the patrons for making this possible. If you haven't, go check out that Patreon link. Do the free trial. See if you want to jump in and support us. We greatly appreciate it. And until next time, guys, I will see you.